Hello. Tonight we are going to slip quietly into the life of a man whose name hums every time you flip on a light switch. Nikola Tesla. Imagine the glow of a bulb, the quiet buzz of a phone charger, or the invisible currents that ripple through the air around you. In some hidden way, all of these trace back to one restless mind. And tonight you'll walk with him, step by step, from stormy childhood skies to final hotel rooms in New York City. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And I'd love to know, where are you listening from and what time is it for you right now? Now dim the lights, let the room settle, and let's drift into tonight's journey together. The story begins in a small village called Smiljan, tucked into the green hills of what is now Croatia, though at the time, in 1856, it was part of the Austrian Empire. The summer nights there could be deceptively quiet, just the chirp of insects, the scent of hay, the shuffle of livestock. But when storms rolled in, they were spectacular. On the night Nikola Tesla was born, a violent thunderstorm cracked across the sky, filling the small wooden house with flashes so bright that villagers whispered it was an omen. A midwife is said to have warned that a child born in lightning would belong to the powers of darkness. His mother, fiercely protective and quick-witted, shot back that he would instead be a child of light. It's the kind of origin story that sounds almost too perfect, like a comic book hero, but it stuck with Tesla his entire life. His family was both ordinary and peculiar. His father, Milutin, was a Serbian Orthodox priest, a man of words and sermons, not machines. Yet he kept a library so large it could swallow entire days of reading. Tesla later said this was where his hunger for knowledge first sparked. He would sneak volumes and devour them late into the night. His mother, Georgina, known as Juka, never had formal schooling, yet she possessed a remarkable mechanical intuition. She could weave, sew, and even invent small household tools on her own. Tesla always insisted his true inventive talent came from her, not his father. "My mother understood things," he once recalled, "before others had even thought of them." As a child, Tesla wasn't just curious, he was downright obsessive. He would dismantle toys, farm tools, and anything that had screws, determined to understand what lay inside. Once, he tried to make a windmill-powered engine by attaching small wings to a beetle, which ended with, well, one very confused beetle and a disappointed young scientist. A little cruel, yes, but remember, this was the 1800s, and backyard experiments sometimes meant sacrificing bugs to the cause of progress. The young boy also displayed something rarer, a photographic memory. He could recite entire passages of books he'd read years before, word for word. Teachers alternated between being impressed and suspicious. Was this boy brilliant or simply strange? The villagers leaned toward the second option, whispering about his odd behavior, especially his fear of pearls. Yes, pearls. Even as a grown man, Tesla couldn't bear to be near them. Imagine being introduced at a dinner party and recoiling in horror because your hostess is wearing a necklace. Awkward doesn't even cover it. But beyond quirks, he had lightning in his veins. Literally, he adored storms. While other children ran inside during strikes, Tesla stood outside, drenched and shivering, watching bolts cut across the sky. He once swore he would harness that raw energy someday to make it flow like a tame river into machines. People laughed at this kind of talk. Historians still argue whether his fascination with storms was a poetic memory he embellished later, or whether little Nikola truly made such bold declarations at that age. Either way, storms became a metaphor he carried for life, unpredictable, destructive, but also illuminating. Life in Smiljan wasn't easy. The village was rural, its people practical. Electricity, industry, even reliable roads, those belonged to faraway cities. Here, cows needed milking, fields needed plowing, winters were harsh, and disease lurked in the shadows. Tesla himself nearly didn't survive childhood. He was prone to fevers, and one serious bout of cholera later in adolescence nearly killed him. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now, picture him as a wiry boy sprinting through fields barefoot, a mop of dark hair, eyes too intense for his age, sometimes frightening the local children with his sharp stares. He loved animals, but also had a reckless streak. One story recalls him fashioning a crude parachute from an umbrella and leaping off a barn roof. The umbrella promptly inverted and Tesla smacked into the ground. He was bruised but unbroken, and oddly proud of the attempt. "I'll do it better next time," he reportedly muttered. That sums up Tesla's personality. Failure wasn't failure, just a draft. The Tesla household echoed with contrasts. Religious sermons on one side, the clink of metal tools on the other, and in between, a boy who spent hours staring at rivers, imagining invisible currents flowing beneath the surface. He once constructed a tiny water wheel to spin in a creek, fascinated by how nature's energy could be coaxed into motion. It was primitive, but it planted the seed. The world was full of hidden power, waiting for someone stubborn enough to release it. Family dynamics shaped him too. His father expected him to follow into priesthood, to use words and philosophy. His mother, quietly, nurtured his tinkering, but the household carried grief as well. Tesla's older brother, Dane, whom everyone considered the more gifted child, died in a riding accident when Nikola was only 5. The shock nearly broke the family, and for Nikola, it carved an invisible scar. He always felt like the second-best son, surviving in the shadow of a dead genius. Maybe that explains why he pushed himself so hard, forever proving he was not just the other child. So picture this scene as you drift toward sleep. A boy standing in a meadow under the open Balkan sky, lightning arcing above, his family torn between books and tools, his mind already humming with visions he couldn't yet explain. He was a strange child, yes, but strange in the way seeds are strange before they sprout into something unexpected. And while the villagers saw just another barefoot boy with odd habits, history would remember him differently, not as the boy afraid of pearls or the child who fell off barns with umbrellas, but as someone who looked at lightning and thought, "I can work with that." As he grew older in the little village of Smiljan, his mind sharpened, but his body remained delicate. He was that odd boy who both amazed and confounded teachers, the one who could calculate complicated mathematical problems faster than the slate could be cleaned. Schoolrooms in the 1860s were bare, with chalk dust hanging in the air, the smell of ink and wooden benches heavy in the room. There he sat, small and serious, the kind of student who terrified classmates because he actually enjoyed homework. His memory was astonishing. Once he read a book, the words seemed to stick forever. One teacher recalled how he rattled off entire chapters from memory as if he had just been reading them. But brilliance was never simple. Alongside this gift came a darker burden, terrifying illnesses and vivid hallucinations. He did not merely imagine things, he saw them. Bright flashes of light blinded him unexpectedly, followed by images so real he struggled to tell where reality ended. A simple word might trigger a mental picture so intense it felt physical, hovering in front of his eyes. He would swat the air, as if brushing away a ghost only he could see. These episodes worried his father, who suspected madness. Yet they excited the boy, for within those visions, he could build. Machines formed fully in his mind, not sketches, but complete structures, turning and moving in perfect detail. Later in life, he would call this his greatest talent, the ability to construct, test, and even dismantle inventions entirely in imagination, long before hammer ever met nail. Historians still argue whether this was a form of eidetic memory, synesthesia, or some neurological quirk. Whatever it was, it made him different, too different for some. Yet he was also a boy of the countryside, which meant chores, herding cattle, chopping wood, fetching water. His mind wandered while his hands worked. He daydreamed about endless wheels that never stopped spinning, about rivers transformed into fountains of power. Once he tried to harness a trickle of water from a brook with a makeshift turbine, watching the wheel turn endlessly until it sputtered out. It was a simple failure, but in his imagination, it ran forever. That word, forever, haunted him. He dreamed of perpetual motion machines, an idea he would never quite let go of, even though every science teacher insisted they were impossible. School wasn't only numbers and visions, it was also rivalry. One memory stood out. A fellow student challenged him at math. The classroom grew hushed, wooden chairs creaking as heads turned. He calculated in his head, whispering the answers faster than chalk could keep pace. The teacher was baffled. He was triumphant, yet anxious, because the flashes of light had begun again. Sometimes he needed to hide in dark rooms just to steady himself. Then came illness. Around age 17, while away at higher school, he was struck down by cholera. Bedridden for months, the fever scorched his body, hollowing his cheeks and sapping his strength. Everyone expected him to die. His father, pacing with worry, promised God that if his son survived, he would not be forced into the priesthood. He would be allowed to pursue engineering. Lying weak in bed, the boy felt a sudden surge of purpose. Against the odds, he recovered. Recovery did not cure his eccentricities. He remained hypersensitive. Ordinary sounds, like a watch ticking, drove him nearly mad. He could hear faint noises others could not. A fly landing on a table sounded thunderous. Light dazzled him so much that he squinted constantly. These heightened senses made daily life uncomfortable, but they also sharpened his attention. Later, he claimed he could hear thunder from 550 miles away. Historians debate whether this was an exaggeration, but his friends never doubted his strange abilities. Social life offered little relief. He was tall and awkward, with a stern face that rarely bent into a smile. While other boys talked about hunting or girls, he rambled about turbines and the mysteries of energy. People nodded politely, but he could see the sideways glances. Yet he was not immune to fun. He once built a crude, motor-powered model of a boat and ran it along a stream, to the amazement of local children. They cheered, though secretly they whispered that he might be dabbling in witchcraft. Small-town gossip, timeless. What set him apart most wasn't just intelligence, but persistence. One winter, he contracted another illness, a fever that left him bedridden again. To distract himself, he memorized entire volumes of Goethe and Serbian poetry, reciting them to his bemused family. His father sighed as he rattled off lines for hours, while his mother sewed in silence, occasionally smiling at his unstoppable recitations. Still, tragedy lingered. The shadow of his older brother, Dane. His death years earlier hung heavy over the household. Relatives constantly reminded him that Dane had been the truly gifted one. Growing up in that shadow, every achievement was weighed against a brother who was no longer there. Perhaps that was why he pushed himself so hard, determined to shine, even if it exhausted him. Through it all, he was building the foundation of who he would become, a brilliant but eccentric student, cursed with illness, yet blessed with vision, haunted by family loss, and always restless. At this stage, he was just a boy dreaming of lightning, tinkering with streams, dazzling and bewildering teachers in equal measure. The world had no idea what was coming, but his mind already hummed with it. And as he drifted toward sleep, he lay as a lanky teenager, pale from fever, in a dimly lit room, whispering to himself about machines that might turn forever, about invisible forces that might someday be tamed. He closed his eyes, but behind them, the machines spun on, perfectly formed, awaiting their moment. Visions began to shape not only Nikola Tesla's imagination, but the rhythm of his daily life. As he grew into a young man, these mental pictures, so vivid, so insistent, followed him everywhere. He would see a word, and instantly an image would flash before his eyes, sharp as reality. At times, it was overwhelming. He once confessed that the brightness of these visions could leave him trembling, unable to distinguish between what was truly before him and what existed only in his mind. But these visions also became his workshop. Where most inventors filled pages with sketches and calculations, Tesla carried entire machines in his imagination. He could rotate them, test them, and even dismantle them, all without touching a single tool. Later, he would claim that when he finally built a machine in real life, it often matched exactly what he had tested in his head. To him, the mind was not just a place of ideas, but a laboratory as tangible as any workshop. Historians still argue whether this gift was a symptom of a neurological condition, a form of synesthesia, or something altogether unique. Whatever it was, it gave Tesla an unusual kind of power, the ability to perfect inventions before the world ever saw them. Let us picture him as a student, walking home through the narrow streets of Karlovac, where he attended higher school. The buildings were modest, the cobblestones uneven beneath his steps. Around him, classmates chatted about their lessons or future plans. But Tesla's gaze was distant, fixed not on the road, but on a dynamo spinning silently in his mind. He barely noticed the chatter, so absorbed was he in the machinery of his imagination. At times, he tried to explain these visions. Friends found their descriptions both astonishing and unsettling. How could someone see a design as if it were physically there? Some doubted him, thinking it mere exaggeration, but others recalled how he would pause mid-conversation, eyes widening as if he were staring at something hovering in the air, something no one else could see. Despite this extraordinary ability, Tesla's path was not smooth. He struggled with discipline in school. His brilliance dazzled teachers, but he was easily distracted, wandering off into elaborate thought experiments. During lectures, he might suddenly drift into silence, lost in calculations, his pen hovering over the page. His grades, though often high, sometimes slipped, a result of this restless mind. One curious quirk followed him: his obsession with perfection and cleanliness. He disliked round objects, especially pearls, and had peculiar habits about washing his hands and clothing. Later in life, these would harden into strong compulsions, but even as a student, the seeds were there. He wanted the world around him as orderly as the machines in his imagination. During these years, Tesla also began to develop his love of literature. While numbers and formulas filled his days, at night he memorized long passages of poetry, particularly the works of Goethe. It was not enough to read them, he wanted to carry them in his mind, word for word, as though he were building a personal library inside himself. Imagine a young man lying awake, candlelight flickering, his lips moving softly as he repeated lines again and again until they were etched into memory. Yet illness shadowed him. He was often frail, sometimes confined to bed by fever or exhaustion. These long hours of recovery only deepened his habit of mental invention. While others rested, Tesla's mind was busy turning wheels, shaping magnets, or imagining vast power systems flowing across entire countries. He was not yet 20, but he dreamed on the scale of empires. Let's not forget the human side. Despite his brilliance, Tesla was socially awkward. His classmates found him intense, sometimes cold. He did not court friendship easily, nor did he chase after the dances and distractions that filled the evenings of other students. Instead, he walked alone, notebook in hand, or wandered the fields outside town, watching rivers flow and imagining energy waiting to be captured. He remained fascinated by the idea of perpetual motion, a wheel that could turn endlessly without stopping. Scientists dismissed it as fantasy, but Tesla, stubborn and curious, clung to the dream. Even decades later, that obsession would return in new forms. One incident stands out from these early student years. Tesla was once challenged to a contest of mental arithmetic. The classroom fell silent as problems were called out. Numbers flew, chalk scratched, and Tesla calmly gave answers faster than they could be written on the board. His teacher, stunned, accused him of cheating. But no, this was simply Tesla's mind, quick, precise, and restless. His classmates, both impressed and unsettled, could only shake their heads. These years were the forge where his identity began to harden. Illness tempered him. Visions guided him, poetry nourished him, and rivalry spurred him forward. He was not yet the inventor of alternating current, not yet the man who would light up world's fairs and design towers to harness the air itself. He was still only a student, thin and serious, with too many shadows in his eyes. But already something extraordinary was forming. In those long nights of memorized poetry, in the flashes of light that startled him, in the quiet calculations scribbled on the edges of notebooks, the shape of his future was beginning to emerge. So, let us leave him here for now, walking alone under the lamplight of Karlovac, his dark coat wrapped against the chill. Around him, classmates laugh and talk of ordinary futures. But in Tesla's mind, great machines already hum and spin, invisible yet complete. The world is not ready for them. He, however, is already preparing. After the school days in Karlovac, Tesla's life took a turn filled with both heartbreak and uncertainty. He had proven himself as a gifted student, dazzling his teachers with mathematics and mechanical insights, but his path forward was anything but straight. The family carried an unspoken grief that never quite left. The death of Tesla's older brother Dane years earlier still hung heavy in their household. For Nikola, the loss remained a wound that drove him relentlessly, as though he were competing with a ghost. At 17, he enrolled at the Polytechnic School in Graz, Austria. Here, the atmosphere was different: larger lecture halls, a more formal rhythm, and professors who demanded precision. Tesla immersed himself with intensity. He attended every class, took exhaustive notes, and studied until dawn. He was so devoted that professors spoke of him as a model student, destined for greatness, at first. But exhaustion and pressure soon began to show. He was brilliant, yes, but also obsessive. He would work for 20 hours straight, then collapse into sleep, only to rise and repeat the cycle. Classmates admired his dedication, though some quietly wondered if he was burning himself out. His professors, too, began to worry about his health. The strain of long hours and relentless study weighed heavily on him, and his fragile constitution, weakened by past illnesses, did not hold up well. At Graz, he first encountered something that changed the trajectory of his thoughts forever: the Gram Dynamo, an early type of electrical generator that could also work as a motor. Watching it in action was, for Tesla, a revelation. He studied the design carefully, his mind already sketching improvements and alternatives. It was here that the seed of alternating current took root, though it would take years for it to bloom fully. And yet his academic career faltered. Despite his brilliance, his habits grew erratic. He quarreled with professors, missed classes, and slipped into gambling. Yes, gambling. In smoky cafes, surrounded by the clatter of coins and cards, Tesla risked what little money he had on games of chance. He later admitted he lost much more than he won, and though he occasionally recouped his losses with sudden streaks of luck, the habit gnawed at him. At times, he even lost his tuition money, forcing his family into humiliating scrambles to cover the debts. The tension built until eventually Tesla dropped out. He vanished from Graz without a diploma, leaving behind baffled professors and unpaid bills. For years afterward, he allowed his family to believe he had completed his studies. It was one of his lifelong tendencies. When overwhelmed, he simply disappeared from one life and started another. Historians still argue whether this moment should be seen as a failure or a necessary break, a shedding of one skin before he grew into the next. After leaving Graz, Tesla's life entered a wandering phase. He worked odd jobs, drifted from city to city, and battled bouts of despair. There were moments when he seemed close to giving up, crushed by poverty and illness. Once, near the river Sava, in a state of depression, he reportedly contemplated ending his life. But instead, he pulled himself back with renewed determination, almost as though he had been reborn. In his own later recollections, this was the moment he resolved to dedicate himself entirely to invention, no matter the personal cost. During this period, tragedy struck again at home. His father, Milutin, died in 1879. The family reeled from the loss, and Nikola returned to Smiljan briefly, a tall and somber figure walking once more through the village fields where his boyhood fascination with storms had begun. His mother, Georgina, still strong-willed, urged him to continue chasing knowledge. Her support steadied him, but the loss of his father pushed him further from the expectations of priesthood and firmly onto the path of invention. There is a poignant image here: Tesla, standing in the same meadows where, as a boy, he once watched lightning tear open the night sky. Now older, dressed in black, he watches storms with the same intensity, but no longer as a child dreaming of impossible machines. Now the vision sharpens. He believes he can turn that lightning into power that could change the world. His wandering years were marked by both struggle and discovery. He worked for telegraph companies, learned about the practical limitations of existing electrical systems, and began to imagine solutions. The world of the late 1870s and early 1880s was buzzing with talk of electricity, but the systems were crude, fragile, and unreliable. Tesla, with his restless imagination, saw not just improvement, but transformation. And so, though these years were filled with setbacks, debts, and personal grief, they also laid the foundation for what was to come. Out of academic failure, gambling losses, and family tragedy emerged a man more determined than ever to shape the invisible forces he had dreamed of since boyhood. Let us picture him in this stage of life: tall, gaunt, and intense, walking alone through the streets of Budapest, Paris, or whichever city held him at the time, carrying little more than a notebook and his visions. The world might see him as a drifter, but within his mind, vast electrical systems were already buzzing, complete and alive, only waiting for the right moment to leap into reality. As Tesla moved into the early 1880s, his wandering years slowly began to take on sharper form. He found himself drawn to practical work, taking positions in telegraph companies and electrical firms. These jobs were often modest, installing equipment, repairing machinery, adjusting circuits, but each one added another layer to his knowledge. Where others saw tedious tasks, Tesla saw opportunities to test his ideas against reality. In Budapest in 1881, Tesla secured a position with the Central Telegraph Office. The city, alive with the clatter of carriages and the hum of progress, became the backdrop for one of the most important revelations of his life. While walking one afternoon with a friend in a park, Tesla's mind returned, as it so often did, to the puzzle of electric motors. He had long been dissatisfied with the direct current motors then in use. They sparked, overheated, and wasted energy. There had to be a better way. Then, in a flash, it came to him. As the setting sun lit the park in golden tones, Tesla suddenly envisioned a rotating magnetic field, an elegant principle that could make alternating current motors possible. In his mind, he saw it clearly: coils, fields, and movement, all working in harmony without sparks or commutators. To his astonished companion, he bent down and sketched the design in the dirt with a stick. That moment would echo through history. The rotating magnetic field would become the foundation of modern alternating current systems. Yet in that instant, it was just an idea, carried by a tall, restless man, more dream than reality. In Budapest, Tesla also endured bouts of illness, nervous exhaustion that left him bedridden for weeks. At times, he claimed his senses were so heightened during illness that distant sounds or faint lights overwhelmed him. But even in weakness, his imagination never stopped. Ideas flowed through him with the same intensity as ever. By 1882, Tesla had moved to Paris, seeking steadier work and larger opportunities. He found employment with the Continental Edison Company, part of the vast network established under Thomas Edison's name. In Paris, he installed and repaired arc lighting systems, the electric lamps that were beginning to replace gaslight in European cities. The work was grueling, but it placed him close to the heart of electrical innovation. It was also in Paris that Tesla's reputation for brilliance began to spread among engineers. He solved problems that baffled others, improved machinery on the spot, and proposed bold alternatives. When a generator failed, he could diagnose the flaw almost instantly. His mind seemed wired directly into the circuits he handled. And yet, as always, Tesla's ambitions stretched beyond the immediate task. He saw flaws in Edison's direct current systems and longed to introduce his alternating current vision. But in France, and even more so in America, Edison's influence was enormous. Direct current was the established path, backed by money, reputation, and industrial momentum. Tesla was an outsider with only sketches and convictions. Still, Paris offered him a taste of possibility. He was no longer drifting from city to city, but embedded in a world where electrical work mattered deeply. The cafes buzzed with conversations about technology, industry, and invention. Tesla, tall and reserved, often kept to himself, scribbling in notebooks. His colleagues admired his brilliance, but found his intensity unusual, even unsettling. During this time, Tesla also befriended a manager named Charles Batchelor, who recognized his potential. Batchelor had worked closely with Edison himself and would later play a role in connecting Tesla to opportunities across the Atlantic. Fate was aligning in quiet, almost invisible ways. By the early 1880s, Tesla stood at a crossroads. He had survived illness, loss, and failure. He had glimpsed the vision of alternating current in Budapest and honed his skills in Paris. Yet he knew that to realize his grand ideas, he would need a stage far larger than Europe could offer. That stage would be America, the land of Edison, of industry, of bold invention. And soon, Tesla would make the leap. Paris had given Tesla work, recognition among engineers, and the beginnings of a reputation. Yet, as the calendar moved deeper into 1882 and 1883, a restlessness stirred in him once again. He had already sketched in his imagination the alternating current motor, but he lacked the resources to bring it to life. For all the admiration his Paris colleagues showed him, there was little appetite to gamble on such a radical departure from Edison's trusted systems. Still, Tesla pressed on. His duties at the Continental Edison Company grew, and his sharp insights caught the attention of supervisors. When problems emerged with lighting systems, it was often Tesla they summoned to diagnose the issue. He displayed a knack not just for identifying faults, but for suggesting improvements, sometimes unconventional ones. Imagine being the coworker assigned to shadow him. One moment he's repairing a generator, the next he's explaining how he might harness Niagara Falls to power entire cities. It was exhilarating and maybe a little unnerving. In 1883, Tesla was sent to Strasbourg, Germany, to repair a malfunctioning plant. Once there, he worked with determination, and when he had free time, he began constructing a prototype of his alternating current motor. In a modest workshop far from home, he finally transformed the sketches from Budapest into a working model. It was rough, improvised from available parts, but it rotated exactly as he had envisioned. For Tesla, it was proof that his vision was not mere fantasy. It could be reality. Yet, recognition did not follow immediately. Promises of reward for his successful repairs in Strasbourg fell through, and Tesla found himself disillusioned once more. His invention was real, but the path to acceptance seemed blocked. In moments like this, he often lapsed into his old habit of long, solitary walks, mind whirring with possibilities. Paris, meanwhile, was a city alive with innovation. Electric lamps glowed in cafes, the hum of dynamos filled the air, and engineers debated late into the night. Tesla walked those boulevards, tall and slender, a figure both part of and apart from the scene. He had the brilliance of an insider, but the solitude of an outsider. Historians still argue whether Tesla's time in Paris hardened his determination or simply exhausted him. On one hand, it gave him professional standing and contacts, most importantly, Charles Batchelor, the manager who admired him enough to recommend him abroad. On the other hand, the constant frustration of seeing his alternating current dream ignored may have deepened his sense of isolation. But one thing is clear: Paris prepared him for the next chapter. His skills had matured, his motor was born, and his conviction had sharpened. He knew now that to pursue his grand ambitions, he would need more than technical brilliance. He would need a new world. And so, with Batchelor's encouragement, Tesla made the decision that would change everything. He would cross the Atlantic to America, a land where Edison himself reigned supreme, where fortunes could be made or broken overnight, and where, perhaps, just perhaps, his ideas would find a stage vast enough. Picture the moment: a young inventor carrying little more than his notebooks and unyielding dreams, setting his sights on New York City. He could not have known the storms and triumphs that awaited him, but we, looking back, can see that the currents of history, like those alternating fields he envisioned, were already shifting in his favor. In the spring of 1884, Nikola Tesla boarded a ship bound for New York. The Atlantic stretched wide and unpredictable, and Tesla, with his few belongings and even fewer dollars, must have felt both excitement and unease. Legend has it that during the journey, a quarrel with another passenger left Tesla beaten and robbed, his ticket and luggage stolen. By the time the ship docked in New York Harbor, he had little more than the clothes he wore, a few coins, and a letter of recommendation addressed to none other than Thomas Edison. Imagine the scene: the Statue of Liberty freshly standing, the skyline far humbler than today's, but already bristling with ambition. For a man who had spent his life chasing lightning in the mind, New York must have seemed like a city already electrified. Horse-drawn carriages filled the avenues, and the elevated railway rattled overhead. Immigrants poured through Ellis Island each day, and among them was Tesla, tall, thin, eyes sharp with purpose. The letter he carried was from Charles Batchelor, his supportive manager in Paris, and it read with glowing confidence: "I know two great men, and you are one of them. The other is this young man." Those words alone might have made Tesla's heart beat faster. Edison was the king of practical invention, backed by powerful companies and a swarm of loyal engineers. To step into Edison's world was to step onto the very stage Tesla had dreamed of. When he presented himself to Edison's offices, Tesla was taken on quickly, assigned to improve and repair Edison's direct current equipment. Here, the contrast between the two men became obvious. Edison was hands-on, practical, famously uninterested in deep theory. He worked by trial and error, sometimes testing thousands of variations before arriving at a solution. Tesla, by contrast, envisioned entire machines in his mind, running them mentally, adjusting them without ever touching a tool. To Edison, Tesla's method seemed almost too abstract. To Tesla, Edison seemed wasteful. Still, Tesla delivered results. He impressed Edison with his skill, reportedly working long shifts, sometimes from 10 in the morning until 5 the next morning. There's a story that Edison once promised Tesla $50,000 if he could redesign and improve certain DC generators. Tesla did exactly that, but when he asked for payment, Edison laughed. "Tesla, you don't understand our American humor." Whether this exchange happened precisely as told, historians still debate. But what is clear is that Tesla felt cheated and disappointed. Jokes aside, Tesla could not suppress his conviction that alternating current was the future. Edison, stubbornly devoted to direct current, dismissed it. The two men's philosophies clashed like opposing charges. Tesla admired Edison's achievements, but found him unwilling to consider the elegance of AC. Edison respected Tesla's talent, but thought his ideas impractical, perhaps even dangerous. During this period, Tesla lived frugally, often skipping meals, sending money home when he could. Despite his brilliance, he was just another immigrant trying to carve a place in a competitive city. New York's nights buzzed with activity, electric lamps spreading slowly into the streets, but Tesla often wandered them alone, his mind returning again and again to the motor he had glimpsed in Budapest. After less than a year, Tesla left Edison's company. The break was inevitable. Edison's empire had no room for alternating current. Tesla, once again, found himself without support, a visionary inventor standing outside the gates of power. Yet, in leaving, he set the stage for the most important partnership of his life, one that would not only lift his inventions into reality, but also ignite one of the fiercest rivalries in the history of science and technology. Tesla's break with Edison left him in a precarious position. Alone in New York, with little money and no steady work, he tried to pursue his alternating current dreams, but quickly ran into obstacles. He took odd jobs to survive, digging ditches, hauling materials, anything to pay for rent and food. For a man whose mind teemed with visions of rotating magnetic fields and wireless energy, this must have felt like a cruel mismatch between destiny and circumstance. But fortune has a way of circling back. In 1887, Tesla attracted a group of investors who recognized his potential. They helped him establish the Tesla Electric Company, giving him a small laboratory in Lower Manhattan. Here, for the first time, he had space, tools, and a bit of financial backing. In that workshop, he constructed prototypes of his alternating current motor and began demonstrating their capabilities. The idea that had burst into his mind years earlier in a Budapest park now spun and hummed before astonished audiences. Word spread quickly. Here was a motor that ran smoothly, without sparking or overheating, one that promised to transmit power over long distances more efficiently than Edison's direct current systems. The timing was perfect because American cities were expanding and demand for electricity was exploding. Still, acceptance was far from certain. Edison fought fiercely for his DC system, which he considered safer, more reliable, and already entrenched in cities like New York. Tesla's AC machines, elegant though they were, faced skepticism. Could they really be scaled? Would alternating current not prove dangerous? Historians still argue whether Edison's doubts were sincere technical concerns or mostly business strategy to protect his empire. During this time, Tesla's demonstrations became events in themselves. He was a natural showman despite his quiet demeanor. He would send sparks crackling through the air, light lamps with current seemingly flowing through his own body, or make small motors spin with a simple wave of his hand. These displays blended science with spectacle, leaving audiences both thrilled and slightly nervous. It was through these experiments and public demonstrations that Tesla caught the attention of George Westinghouse, the industrialist and inventor who saw an alternating current not only promise but profit. Westinghouse, unlike Edison, was willing to gamble on bold new systems. He acquired patents from Tesla and gave him the resources to advance AC technology. This partnership would prove pivotal, for it pitted Tesla and Westinghouse directly against Edison in what became known as the War of the Currents. At its heart, the war was not simply about wires and voltage. It was about the future of electricity itself. Would the world run on Edison's direct current, limited in range and costly to expand? Or would it embrace Tesla's alternating current, capable of powering entire cities from a single plant? For Tesla, the clash was deeply personal. He respected Edison's determination, but bristled at his unwillingness to consider alternatives. For Edison, Tesla was a talented but misguided dreamer, threatening to unravel years of hard work. Their rivalry embodied the tension between practicality and vision, short-term dominance and long-term possibility. By the late 1880s, the stage was set for a technological showdown that would spill into newspapers, lecture halls, and even traveling circuses. Tesla had finally found an ally powerful enough to support him. Edison had no intention of yielding, and the public, dazzled by the spectacle of electric power, was about to witness a battle unlike any before. The late 1880s and early 1990s marked the true birth of alternating current as a practical system, and Tesla found himself at the center of it. In partnership with George Westinghouse, his motor and transformer designs began to move from prototypes into reality. Factories and workshops started installing AC systems, and the promise of distributing electricity across long distances suddenly seemed possible. For Tesla, this was vindication. The vision he had first sketched in the dirt of a Budapest park was now humming to life in workshops across America. He refined his inventions, producing patents for induction motors, transformers, and other components that formed the backbone of AC power. Each success felt like another brick laid in the foundation of the modern electrical age. But progress did not come quietly. Edison, still fiercely devoted to his direct current empire, doubled down on his opposition. He argued that alternating current was too dangerous, that the higher voltages could kill without warning. Newspapers carried frightening stories of accidents, often emphasizing AC as the culprit. In this way, Edison and his allies sought to sway public opinion. Meanwhile, Tesla pressed forward with demonstrations that combined science with theater. One of his favorite tricks was to allow current to pass through his own body, lighting lamps he held in his hands. Audiences gasped, unsure whether they were witnessing genius or madness. Tesla, with his calm demeanor and slightly mischievous tone, enjoyed showing that alternating current could be both powerful and, when properly managed, safe. It's the kind of performance that would fit right into a modern science show, minus the part where the host risks electrocuting themselves. In 1891, Tesla gave a lecture before the American Institute of Electrical Engineers in New York. He demonstrated his alternating current systems with clarity and confidence, showing that AC could transmit power efficiently over long distances. The event made headlines, and Tesla's reputation as a visionary inventor skyrocketed. Historians still argue whether Tesla fully understood the business implications of his patents. Some believe he cared little for money and more for proving his ideas, while others suggest he underestimated the commercial value of what he had created. Whatever the truth, Westinghouse certainly recognized their worth. He acquired Tesla's patents and placed them at the core of his company's growing AC empire. And so, by the early 1990s, Tesla's alternating current was no longer a dream or a prototype. It was a viable competitor to Edison's system. Factories lit up with AC lamps, and entire neighborhoods buzzed with power transmitted more efficiently than DC could manage. Tesla's place in history was beginning to crystallize, even as new challenges loomed. For a man who once wandered fields sketching ideas in the dirt, to now stand in New York City demonstrating technology that could light the world, this was the beginning of a triumph. Yet as we will see, the path ahead was anything but smooth. For every success Tesla celebrated, Edison plotted counterattacks, and the public's fear of electricity provided fertile ground for dramatic, even shocking displays. By the early 1890s, the rivalry between Edison's direct current and Tesla's alternating current had escalated into what newspapers gleefully called the War of the Currents. It wasn't a polite academic debate, it was a very public, very theatrical struggle for dominance. waged in laboratories, boardrooms, and even the press. Edison, determined to protect his DC system, resorted to dramatic warnings about the dangers of alternating current. His allies organized demonstrations where animals, dogs, calves, even a horse, were electrocuted with AC before shocked audiences. These grim spectacles were meant to convince the public that alternating current was unsafe, too violent a force to flow through their homes and streets. Looking back, it feels almost like a macabre sideshow, electricity weaponized for propaganda. Tesla, meanwhile, took a very different approach. Instead of fear, he leaned into wonder. At lectures and public demonstrations, he would allow current to pass through his own body, calmly lighting lamps with his bare hands. He created dazzling arcs of electricity that leapt through the air, buzzing and snapping like blue-white whips. His audiences were amazed and perhaps reassured that alternating current could be controlled with elegance rather than brute force. The war grew even stranger when Edison's associates proposed using AC for executions, arguing that if it was dangerous enough to kill, it should never be allowed into homes. In 1890, the first electric chair powered by alternating current was used at Auburn Prison in New York. Newspapers called the event gruesome, with one reporter labeling the act Westinghouse, after Tesla's industrial ally. Historians still argue whether Edison personally orchestrated this smear campaign or if overzealous supporters carried it further than he intended. Either way, the association between AC and death was deliberately fueled. Tesla remained largely above the fray, preferring to focus on invention rather than mudslinging. But George Westinghouse, ever the businessman, understood the stakes. Contracts, city franchises, and millions of dollars hinged on convincing the public that AC was the future. For every shocking demonstration staged by Edison's camp, Westinghouse countered with arguments about efficiency, scale, and cost. And slowly, public opinion began to shift. Factories powered by AC ran smoothly, lighting systems spread. Tesla's patents were implemented in real-world applications, proving the system's reliability. Newspapers that once printed dire warnings now carried stories about AC's success. Through it all, Tesla remained both participant and observer. His inventions at the heart of the conflict, but his personality curiously detached. He seemed less interested in personal wealth or victory than in proving the beauty of his ideas. He often spoke of electricity in poetic terms, describing it as if it were alive, a natural force he merely channeled. To him, alternating current was not just technology, it was harmony with nature's own rhythms. By the mid-1890s, it was becoming clear that Edison's direct current system was losing ground. The tide was turning toward Tesla's alternating current. Yet, the war was not over. One great test remained, a project so ambitious it would either secure AC's triumph forever or prove its fatal flaw. That project was Niagara Falls. At the edge of Niagara Falls, water thundered over cliffs with a roar that could be heard miles away, turning mist into the air and shaking the ground beneath. For centuries, the falls had been admired for their beauty, but by the late 19th century, engineers saw in them something more, a limitless source of energy. Harnessing Niagara meant unlocking power on a scale never before attempted. The question was, whose system would carry that power into the modern age? In 1893, the Niagara Falls Power Company selected alternating current as the backbone of the project. The choice was monumental. Out of all the competing designs, Tesla's AC system, backed by Westinghouse, won the bid. This wasn't just a contract, it was a declaration that alternating current was the future. Tesla, who had spoken years earlier of using Niagara to power cities, must have felt a sense of destiny fulfilled. He had once been laughed at for such ambitions, Imagine waterfalls lighting homes hundreds of miles away. Yet now his vision was becoming reality. Crews constructed massive turbines and generators designed with Tesla's principles in mind, while high-voltage transmission lines were planned to carry electricity farther than ever before. Meanwhile, in Chicago, Tesla and Westinghouse had already made headlines at the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition. Their alternating current system lit up the entire fair, bathing it in a glow of electric lamps that dazzled millions of visitors. The fairgrounds shimmered with white light, fountains danced in electric colors, and the public gasped at the spectacle. For many, it was their first encounter with electric light on such a grand scale. The White City, as it was called, became a powerful advertisement for alternating current. Edison's direct current system, once dominant, suddenly seemed small and outdated. Historians still argue whether Tesla himself was deeply involved in every detail at Niagara, or if much of the heavy lifting fell to Westinghouse engineers. What's certain is that Tesla's patents and vision formed the project's foundation. The alternating current generators installed there bore the mark of his imagination, even if others executed the day-to-day engineering. In 1896, the system came online. Electricity from Niagara Falls surged along transmission lines, reaching Buffalo, New York, about 25 miles away. For the first time in history, a natural wonder was harnessed to supply power to an entire city. It was a triumph not only of engineering, but of imagination. Newspapers hailed it as the dawn of a new age. Tesla, however, received little of the wealth such a victory might have brought. In earlier negotiations, he had agreed to relinquish some of his royalties to ease Westinghouse's financial burden. Some say he even tore up a contract worth millions, a gesture of loyalty that cost him dearly later in life. Historians still debate the details of this decision. Was it noble self-sacrifice or simply poor business sense? Whatever the truth, it ensured that Tesla's fame grew far larger than his fortune. As the 19th century drew toward its close, alternating current was no longer the underdog. From Chicago to Niagara, it had proven its power and practicality. The war of currents had ended, and Tesla's vision had won. The world now ran on alternating current. Yet for Tesla, victory was only a stepping stone. Having lit cities and conquered waterfalls, his imagination was already moving elsewhere, to wireless transmissions, global communication, and ideas so vast they made even Niagara seem small. With alternating current firmly established, most inventors might have rested, content with having reshaped the world's power systems. But Tesla was never one to linger on a finished project. His mind leapt restlessly toward the horizon, always chasing visions of what might come next. By the mid-1890s, he was speaking openly about ideas that sounded closer to science fiction than engineering. He dreamed of transmitting not just electricity, but information, wirelessly, through the air, across oceans. Imagine, he would say, a world connected by invisible signals, voices carried without wires, power flowing freely through the atmosphere. For listeners in crowded lecture halls, it must have sounded like sorcery. In his New York laboratory, Tesla began experimenting with high-frequency currents and wireless transmission. Coils taller than a man crackled with bluish light, sending arcs that hummed and hissed across the room. Visitors described the atmosphere of his lab as both thrilling and unsettling, filled with the sharp scent of ozone and the constant buzz of unseen energy. Some experiments lit lamps from across the room without a single wire attached, a feat so baffling it bordered on the unbelievable. Tesla also grew fascinated with resonance, the idea that energy could be transmitted by tuning systems to vibrate in harmony. He compared it to music. Just as a violin string can cause another to vibrate at the same pitch, so could carefully tuned machines transfer energy invisibly. This principle became central to his wireless dreams. Around this time, he also spoke of inventions with dramatic flair: a death ray capable of ending wars, global wireless communication networks, and even harnessing the Earth itself as a conductor for boundless energy. Historians still argue whether Tesla truly intended some of these devices as practical projects, or if they were partly visionary theater meant to spark imagination. Whatever the case, his claims made headlines. Public demonstrations fed his growing reputation as both genius and showman. He lit phosphorescent tubes held in his hands, seemingly conjuring light from nothing. He allowed electricity to flow through his body, sparks dancing from his fingertips, while calmly explaining the principles at work. Audiences alternated between awe and unease. Was this man a scientist, a magician, or something in between? But Tesla's visions required money, and here lay the trouble. Investors, excited by the proven success of alternating current, grew cautious when confronted with ideas that seemed fantastical. Unlike Edison, who excelled at turning inventions into immediate commercial products, Tesla often leapt too far ahead, offering concepts decades before infrastructure or markets could support them. Still, opportunities arose. Wealthy backers, intrigued by his charisma and ambition, occasionally funded his experiments. Newspapers loved his bold proclamations. In 1899, he would take his wireless dreams to a new stage, one that involved towering coils, open skies, and lightning bolts that dwarfed anything produced in his New York lab. But before that, the seeds of his grandest projects were already germinating in his restless mind. Tesla had conquered electricity in wires. Now he set his sights on electricity without them. And in doing so, he stepped into a realm where the line between genius and eccentricity blurred, where every spark lit not just a lamp, but speculation about the future of humanity itself. In the spring of 1899, Tesla left New York behind and traveled west to Colorado Springs. He had chosen this high-altitude town at the edge of the Rocky Mountains for a single reason. Its thin air and open plains made it the perfect place to experiment with wireless electricity on a grand scale. Tesla was 43 years old when he arrived, carrying with him not only his equipment, but also his boundless ambition. Here he hoped to test ideas too large and too dangerous for his city laboratory. With the backing of a few investors and the goodwill of curious locals, he set up a laboratory on the outskirts of town, a large wooden building that, from the outside, looked almost like a barn. Inside, however, it housed some of the most extraordinary machinery the world had ever seen. At the heart of the lab was a giant coil, larger than any he had previously built. Wound with copper wire and connected to capacitors and transformers, it was designed to magnify electrical currents to staggering voltages. Tesla believed that by creating powerful electrical oscillations, he could send energy across vast distances, using the Earth itself as a conductor. The experiments began modestly, small sparks, glowing tubes lit without wires, but soon the displays grew more spectacular. Witnesses later described seeing bolts of lightning shoot from the coil, some stretching over 100 feet into the night sky. The crackling thunder that followed was so loud it could be heard from miles away. Horses in the town panicked. Locals watched from a distance, convinced that Tesla was summoning storms. One famous story tells of a night when Tesla pushed his equipment to its limits. The entire town of Colorado Springs lost power. Lights went dark, telephones fell silent, and electric streetcars ground to a halt. Tesla had unintentionally overloaded the power station. He later apologized, offering to pay for damages, but the incident only added to his legend. Inside his laboratory, Tesla recorded his observations with meticulous care. He claimed to detect signals from distant sources, perhaps even from outer space. He believed he had evidence of natural electrical resonances in the Earth, vibrations that could carry energy across the globe if properly harnessed. To him, it was proof that his wireless vision was not only possible, but inevitable. Late at night, as storms rolled over the plains, Tesla worked tirelessly under the flickering light of electric arcs. He spoke of creating a world system that would allow instant communication across continents, the wireless transmission of news, music, and even images. More boldly, he imagined broadcasting electrical power itself, eliminating the need for wires, poles, or grids. Energy, he declared, should be as free and abundant as the air we breathe. And yet, for all its grandeur, Colorado Springs brought as many questions as answers. Tesla's experiments were awe-inspiring, but difficult to replicate. His notebooks from this period are filled with tantalizing data, but also gaps, leaps of reasoning that remain hard to follow. Investors, while intrigued, were reluctant to pour endless funds into projects with no immediate profit. Still, Tesla left Colorado Springs convinced he had glimpsed the future. He had lit the sky with artificial lightning and felt the pulse of the Earth itself. To him, it was only the beginning. The next step would be even bolder: to build a tower so tall, so powerful, that it could transmit energy across the Atlantic Ocean. The stage was set for Warden Cliff. When Tesla returned from Colorado Springs in 1900, he carried with him a head full of grand visions and a suitcase full of carefully guarded notes. He was convinced that he had unlocked the secret to transmitting power and information without wires across oceans and continents. All he needed now was a place to build his ultimate machine. That place became a patch of land on Long Island, about 60 miles from New York City, in a quiet town called Shoreham. With the financial backing of J.P. Morgan, the titan of American banking, Tesla purchased the site and began construction of what would be his most ambitious project yet, the Warden Cliff Tower. The tower was designed to be nearly 200 feet tall, topped with a massive dome of steel. Beneath it, Tesla had ordered shafts dug deep into the earth, lined with pipes and wires to tap into what he believed were natural electrical currents running through the planet. From this strange combination of towering height and buried roots, he planned to send signals, music, and energy across the Atlantic Ocean, perhaps even to London or Paris. At first, excitement buzzed around the project. Newspapers reported on Tesla's promises of instant global communication, a system to connect people in ways the world had never known. He spoke of broadcasting not just messages, but images, and even power itself. It was as though he wanted to build the internet and wireless charging a full century before either would exist. But reality crept in quickly. J.P. Morgan, pragmatic and shrewd, had given Tesla funding under the impression that this tower would deliver a competitive wireless telegraph system, something like Marconi's, but more powerful. When Tesla explained that his ambitions stretched far beyond messages, that he wanted to send energy freely through the air, Morgan grew hesitant. Free energy might sound poetic, but for a banker, it was a nightmare. Where would the profit come from anyone could light their homes without paying for wires, fuel, or infrastructure? By 1905, Marconi had sent the first wireless signal across the Atlantic. The world celebrated him, not Tesla, as the pioneer of radio. Investors began to see Tesla as more dreamer than businessman. Wardenclyffe stood incomplete, the dome visible for miles, but inside, progress slowed to a crawl. Supplies dried up, workers left, and Tesla, who once dazzled New York society, now found himself sinking into debt. Historians still argue whether the failure of Wardenclyffe was inevitable, too advanced, too utopian, too far from practical use, or whether, with better timing and steadier funding, it might have transformed the modern world. Meanwhile, Tesla's eccentricities grew more visible. He became increasingly reclusive, shunning parties and high society dinners. His obsessions with cleanliness and ritual deepened. He insisted on polishing every piece of cutlery before eating, avoided touching hair, and began to display behaviors that friends described as compulsive. Yet even as the tower rusted in place, Tesla continued to dream. He spoke of wireless lighting for entire cities, ships that could cross the ocean without fuel, and even a teleforce weapon, a so-called death ray, that could make war obsolete. Skeptics rolled their eyes, but for Tesla, the vision was always just a little ahead of reality, waiting for the world to catch up. Wardenclyffe lingered like a ghost on Long Island for years. Locals saw the tower as a curiosity, a monument to ambition. Children dared each other to wander near it, whispering rumors of lightning bolts and secret experiments. For Tesla, it was a symbol of both his highest hopes and his deepest disappointments. By 1917, the U.S. government, fearing the abandoned tower might be used by German spies during World War I, ordered it demolished. The great tower fell, leaving only fragments behind. But the man who conceived it was still alive, wandering New York's hotels, scribbling new designs, and refusing to let go of his dream of a world connected by invisible currents. By the 1920s, Nikola Tesla was no longer the celebrated genius who once lit up world's fairs and harnessed waterfalls. Instead, he drifted between hotels in New York City, carrying only a few personal belongings, unpaid bills, and endless notebooks filled with designs that might never be built. Wardenclyffe was gone, his patents sold or expired, and many of his former investors had turned their attention to other inventors. Yet Tesla's mind did not slow. He continued to speak of bold projects, a global wireless network, energy beamed through the skies, machines that could control the weather, and weapons so powerful they would end all wars. Some reporters humored him, others mocked him. Still, whenever Tesla appeared at press conferences, his piercing eyes and deliberate speech lent a kind of gravity that made even the wildest claims sound almost believable. He became increasingly eccentric. Tesla refused to shake hands, avoided round objects, and counted his steps obsessively. He believed in the health benefits of sunlight and odd diets. Above all, he found comfort in the company of pigeons. At Bryant Park and near his hotel window, he fed them daily, sometimes spending more money on their care than on his own meals. He once confessed to a deep affection for a particular white pigeon, saying he loved her as one loves a person. Meanwhile, honors trickled in, even if wealth did not. Universities and institutions awarded him medals. Foreign governments sent dignitaries to meet him. But behind the recognition, Tesla's daily life grew lonelier. By the 1930s, he lived almost entirely in hotel rooms provided on credit, wearing the same tailored suits he had worn for decades, always immaculately pressed. When World War II loomed, his reputation took on a strange new relevance. Tesla claimed he had developed a death ray that could shoot down enemy planes. Governments listened politely but gave him no serious funding. Historians still argue whether Tesla genuinely believed he had discovered such a weapon, or whether it was a final attempt to regain financial support. In January 7, 1943, at the age of 86, Nikola Tesla died quietly in his room at the New Yorker Hotel. The staff discovered him 2 days later. His body was taken away, but his papers, thousands of pages of notes and drawings, were seized by the U.S. government under the pretense of national security. Rumors swirled that they contained secrets too dangerous to release. Some were eventually returned to his family, others vanished into archives and speculation. In the years that followed, Tesla's legend only grew. To some, he was the forgotten genius, robbed of credit and profit. To others, he was a prophet, envisioning technologies that would define the modern world: wireless communication, renewable energy, even robotics. His name would later be given to a unit of magnetic measurement, to laboratories, and eventually to a car company that revived his fame for a new generation. Tesla had died nearly penniless, but he left behind something far more enduring: an aura of mystery, a vision of a world powered by imagination and curiosity. His life, full of brilliance and heartbreak, continues to glow like one of his electrical sparks, bright, fleeting, unforgettable. And so, as we drift away from his story, perhaps we can take a final lesson from Tesla himself, that dreaming boldly, even impractically, may leave behind a light that outlasts us all. Now, let the pace of the story soften, like the gentle dimming of a lamp at the end of the day. We have followed Tesla's journey from the storms of his childhood in Smiljan through the glittering halls of New York, across the roaring waterfalls at Niagara, and into the quiet solitude of his final hotels. His life stretched between lightning bolts and shadows, filled with triumphs that changed the world and disappointments that weighed heavily on him. As you rest, imagine the quiet hum of electricity lingering in the background, a soft vibration, not harsh or jarring, but steady and calming. Picture a night sky over Colorado Springs, where Tesla once stood, watching artificial lightning dance across the heavens. The flashes fade now into stars, steady and silent, watching over us as time moves gently forward. Breathe slowly. Inhale the cool night air, exhale the day's noise. Tesla's world was one of restless energy, but now we let it become still. His pigeons coo softly in the distance. The city streets quiet down. The grand towers, the sparks, the roaring machines all fall silent. What remains is only the idea that imagination can light the darkest night. As you sink deeper into rest, let go of the noise of invention and the clamor of history. Tesla's story is complete, but yours continues, slowly and peacefully, carried forward by steady breaths and gentle dreams. Allow yourself to drift. as though rocked by the invisible currents Tesla once sought to harness. The lights dim further. The hum fades. The story dissolves into silence. And you, dear listener, may now drift into sleep, guided by the quiet spark of wonder.